Today, guys, we're going to talk about general and field marshal traits, and we are going to give it good old tier list treatment to show you the worst and the very best. So let's start off with basically this very beginning. Winter Specialist. Now, Winter Specialist, all it does is it gives winter attrition reduction by minus 50%. So if you're doing your little Barbarossa, this is going to reduce the amount of attrition you're going to experience on that front line. Attrition isn't even a big deal in Hearts of Iron 4. It really isn't. It's something you can just kind of ignore and not even really have to worry about. A lot of the time, if you're playing a major power, your production's so high, you can kind of negate attrition. So it's not even a big deal. The trait itself sucks. However, there is one reason why you'd want to go for it, why it isn't an F tier, which I'm giving it an E tier. The one reason why you'd ever want to go for Winter Specialist, my guys, is it's one step towards adaptable. And if you ever find yourself in a situation where you have like generals and one of them has Winter Specialist at the very start of the game, you want to always use that general to grind another terrain trait to potentially leapfrog to adaptable. But we'll come back to that later. Next up is Winter Expert. It gives cold acclimatization factor when training or fighting in cold climates. So you can see a cold acclimatization is 100%, meaning in this case doesn't have any impact because this region is not blizzard, snowing, extreme snow, or etc. But it would reduce all the mitigating factors of that cold climate, such as division, recovery, attrition. The truth is, this is something that got added, I think, in Death or Dishonor, or maybe it was Together for Victory. And to be honest with you, it's one of those mechanics that you can safely ignore. It won't make a big impact in your game. And the honest truth is, there is no reason to ever want to go for this. So, unfortunately, Winter Expert is in the dustbin. F tier, my lads. Next up, we've got a bunch of terrain traits that kind of hard to decide which are the good ones or the bad ones because it all just depends on the amount of terrain and where you're going to be fighting. So it is very situational. Most of them, in fact, no, all of them all do the same thing. So 5% speed, an extra attack and defense in that specific region. There's two that you see very rarely, and that's Swamp Fox and to a certain degree also Desert Fox, just because it's either you don't fight in those regions or there just aren't a lot of swamps. So to all fairness, Swamp Fox is probably the very least and the worst. Also, Jungle Rat's kind of rare as well. You tend to notice that quite often when you fight in South America. The most common ones you see quite often are Rangers, Hill Fighters, and Mountaineers, and to maybe less of a degree, Urban Assault Specialists as well. It's one of those ones that's nice to have, but only reason you'd ever want to go for them is to leap to adaptable. I'm going to put it under B tier. They're essential for what they do. They give a decent bonus overall. In all fairness, why would you ever really need these? It's hard to put them into a category. It's like you gain a nice, decent bonus from them, but once again, the only real advantage is to kind of hop onto another one. I would say out of all of them, the biggest bonus that's really worthwhile is probably Mountaineer, due to the fact that mountains have such big terrain trait negatives. I'll maybe come back to this, maybe I'll think about it, but for the most part, I'm going to give them a B tier. One for the leapfrog aspect, and two for the fact that they just give decent bonuses overall. All right, okay, let's jump to the general traits now, because these were specific terrain ones. So we've got Skilled Staffer here. This gives an extra +6 generals that can be held onto your army without suffering an extra penalty to their overall traits. Be aware, if a guy is controlling 24 divisions or more, intentionally going over, you will get this trait quicker. It's one of those ones that I feel like you kind of forget about and then you randomly get at some point because it does require 2000 XP to get it, so it is quite a difficult one to get. It's one of those nice to haves, but it's like something that you just don't really care that much about. One thing I will say though is if they ever do get Skilled Staffer, they're usually a very well-trained general because they've been going a while to grind all their traits. So usually those extra 6 divisions will gain some big buffs when they actually do get them. So that's usually a good reason to have it. And for that in mind, we are going to give him the B tier. It's one of those ones that I would rate higher in a situation where you could proactively go for it if you wanted it. There has been a few times where I've had 30 divisions and I've assigned it onto a 24 limit general and he's grind skill staffer significantly quicker. Next word is Expert Delegator, which is a field marshal trait. It's similar to Skilled Staffer. It's just that you can only have a maximum of 5 armies underneath the field marshal, and if you go over that, you'll suffer from stacking penalties. I personally think this is one that's even rarer than Skilled Staffer. It's one of those super late game ones where your field marshal at this point has probably got all their traits and you have to manually assign this trait. So it's like, why would you ever go for this? Unfortunately, this is a really bad one. And not because it's not very good at what it gives you, because there is some situations you will need it, but it's so unbelievably niche. So I think I'm going to put that into beta. I want to put it lower, but the truth is I think there are some situations where you would go for it. Next up is Guerrilla Fire. This used to only give 10% extra entrenchment speed, but 50% is pretty big now. I think genuinely, if you were playing early early game defending, particularly against Germany or the Soviet Union, this is actually really, really good. You don't really, in most cases, want to be defending in HOI4. You want to be attacking. You want to be on the move. You want to be pushing. So in all fairness, I don't usually recommend defensive traits, but overall, if you want a defensive trait that's actually worthwhile and you want to stack lots of entrenchment, this one, a 50% extra entrenchment digging speed, is actually really good. Just be aware, this is not actually giving you extra entrenchment. What this is doing is letting you entrench 50% quicker. All right, next up is Trickster. One of those kind of springboard ones is something you rarely even take advantage of or really use. Gives extra reconnaissance. Reconnaissance at the moment is not the meta. People don't really care that much about it. People tend to focus more on stats overall, but the only reason you want to go for it is it springboards you to potentially guerrilla fight or improve improvisation expert. But overall, when it comes down to the actual stats and what you're going to use it for, it ranks really, really low. Once again, you have to take into account what it potentially leads and where it potentially goes. So where does it go? It goes to improvisation expert. It allows makeshift bridges and it gives extra 10% movement speed on all terrain types. Just flat 10% extra speed. If you are stacking speed, I suppose this is always really worthwhile to go for. One thing I don't have a lot of experience of is the ability of makeshift bridges. It reduces the river crossing penalty by 40% and it additionally gives an extra 20% attack into rivers as well, which negates the cost of passing over a small river. For a big river though, you'll still suffer from a penalty. In all fairness, this is actually really decent, but once again, it feels kind of niche. At the end of the day, rivers are something that are difficult to break if they're entrenched behind it, but if you're constantly pushing and knocking them back and you've already made a breakthrough, makeshift bridges are kind of poo. This is a difficult one because I think the bonus here is pretty good, but unfortunately command power is something that's more difficult to come by due to you assigning it mostly to your officer corps. And in all fairness, there is an argument to be made that this is better than getting Marines. I don't know, it's a tough one. I think I'm going to give improvisation expert a C tier. Once again, kind of niche. Biggest advantage though is the fact that it kind of like overrides the ability to need Marines. Okay, I'm going to work from top to bottom here. Go for the earned traits. So the earned traits are the ones you gain from grinding certain things in game. General traits are the ones you have to assign and spend command power, and field marshal traits are the same ones as well. So organizer is terrible. It's terrible. However, it does lead on to some really awesome traits for field marshal. So it's one of those ones you would never, ever, ever want to assign and go for or work towards in that way. However, you do need it in those instances where you are working towards some other traits, which we'll talk about later. So organizer is E tier. Next up is panzer leader. For the most part, panzer leader is awesome in those instances where you have got the right tank division. Be aware, if you want to grind this trait, you need to have an armor ratio of 40% or more. So the division needs to consist of 40% armor over infantry, I guess. When you've got it, 60% extra attack is pretty beefy. This is probably like the #1 armor trait that you want to go for. So it is A tier. At the end of the day, armor is strong to begin with, so why would I say no? I don't know. Cavalry leader is another weird one as well, but if you look really closely, it actually gives motorized and mechanized attack, which can actually stack with panzer leader. I know, surprising, right? This one has massively got buffed, and some of the traits it leads on to later on are also really, really strong. Don't underestimate cavalry leader, guys. It is really, really good. Engineer is next. Gives extra river attack and fort attack, with potentially leading on to 2 other traits that aren't very good. Honestly, engineer is just not that great. The fact that people obsess about engineers as a support company, but the engineer trait is so poo, I don't know, man. I just feel like maybe this could be buffed. I'm going to give this a potential D tier. D? Is it a D? Is it a D? Yeah, it's a D. The buffs are okay, but the truth is it leads on to something else. Infantry leader is the bread and butter. Once again, it's all about what it leads on to and the fact that you are using infantry predominantly in the game in most cases. Dude, infantry leader is amazing. And in all fairness, it even leads on to 2 of the traits where you can choose between attacking or defending. And the defending trait is really OP too. Oh, guys, is this an S tier? Are we thinking about an S tier? Oh, man, this is difficult. I'm leaning towards S for this one because infantry is something you use in your army predominantly, and you've got the choice between attacking and defending, which also gives some decent bonuses. I might change my mind on that one. We'll see. Next up is invader. This is one that's really difficult to grind. See, it only requires 100 XP. You can only gain it though when doing amphibious invasions, landing, and fighting before you do the landing. So usually those battles end pretty quickly, or they grind for a long time. In that case, you'll gain the trait anyway. The big bonus though is the minus 30% preparation time. That's pretty big because naval invasions take a long time to prep anyway, and having this is really worthwhile. And then it potentially leads on to 2 of the traits too that aren't aren't really that worthwhile. This is a difficult one, guys, because I think the bonus is okay, but it's just getting it is just an absolute nightmare. The way you get this trait is you've got to kind of do naval invasions that are intended to fail, and it feels so strange. I'm not gonna lie, it is worthwhile to have for the time it takes to reduce it. I think as USA or Japan, I think you get them, and they're the only really two countries that take advantage of it. Okay, I think I've ranked that too low. I think we're gonna go here for D tier now. Yeah, D tier. Next up is Commando. Welcome to another trait that no one goes for obvious reasons, because it is absolutely poo. Why does this not give attack or defense for special forces? Why? Then it would actually be worthwhile. So you've either got to be fighting in low temperatures or high temperatures. You've got to be doing paradrops or doing naval invasions, and then it results in you getting less out of supply penalties. Out of supply penalties are so rubbish. Guys, this is awful. Honestly, Commando is awful, and it even leads on to some awful traits as well that aren't really useful. Remember, at the end of the day, your general and field marshal has a limited amount of trait slots that they can go for. So if you're assigning yourself to Commando to go for these traits on top of it, it's really not worth it. This is one of these traits you start with, but you never work towards, and if you do get it, you get it kind of accidentally. I'm sorry, guys, but Commando is rubbish, and it desperately needs to be buffed. All right, first up, Panzer Expert. This used to be good, but they removed the attack bonus, and maybe I think they added it onto Panzer Leader. Now it's really not worthwhile. So unfortunately, for the amazing Panzer Leader trait, which I think is A tier, this is not very good at all. You never go for this, even if you are specifically making tank divisions that are really defensive. So I'm going to give this a C tier. I imagine if you were for the tanks and you want a bit of defense on your tanks, which is something you rarely need to do, but it's something that's an option. You know, now think about it, the defense on tanks doesn't apply. It's only the mechanized that have got defense. God, this is awful. Oh my God, this is awful. I'm going to give this an E tier. Why would you ever go for this now? Think about it. All right, next up is Combined Arms Expert. This is awesome. Think about it. Mechanized have already high defense to begin with. This gives an extra 15% extra defense for mechanized. This makes you stack the defense on your mechanized incredibly high. But get this, you can go for Panzer Leader and then go for Combined Arms Expert and take advantage of both of them. And it also gives you the increased blitz and encirclement tactics, which Panzer Leader already gives. This is the real MVP, guys. Oh man, I think this is an A tier. It pairs well with Panzer Leader. And I've just realized Panzer Expert is shit. It's going down to F tier. You would never go for Panzer Expert anymore. There's no reason to go for it. 10% defense of 1. What's the point? 1.1? It's pointless. Next up is Cavalry Expert. Extra defense for cavalry. This is really bad as well. You'd want to go for Combined Arms Expert because it does pair well with Cavalry Leader. It is absolute rubbish. Defensive cavalry. Is there a reason to go for it? No, there really isn't any other reason. It is absolutely bad. It really is awful. It takes up a trait as well. Don't forget that these general traits, the ones you have to select, spend command power, and you've only got a limited amount of traits per general. So there's no reason you want to go for this. Next up is Fortress Buster. Extra 15% extra attack and siege artillery. You know, I've reused this recently, and you know what? It isn't too bad. It gives you a 200% chance to damage forts when attacking them. So forts damage quicker. Next up, fort damage chance increases by 200%. So not only does it damage forts more, but it also increases the chance that forts get damaged in combat as well. So the idea is if you're fighting a long, prolonged combat against forts, Sudeten, West Wall, Maginot, if you fight them a long period, the forts will become useless because they'll get damaged and broken and ripped apart. And it also offers you 20% extra attack as well. I feel like in that niche instance, when you need to break a fort, particularly in multiplayer, it would actually kind of be useful, but in the long run, it's really not. The best way of taking out forts is with bombers. So the truth is you'd really not even use this very often. So it's not that great. I'm going to give this a D tier. I think it has a use in those stalemate situations when you need to break a fort, but otherwise it's just pointless. Next up is Scavenger. I think this is the good one of these two traits. 3% extra equipment capture ratio. Wow, it's so low. That really needs to be buffed. If that was like 10%, that would actually be worthwhile, but 3% is less than the maintenance companies, and maintenance companies are piss cheap. Man, this is awful. Nah, I'm giving it an F tier. There's no reason you ever select this. There's no reason you pick it. Why would you? I think in that one instance where you're playing as a minor power and you have a general that needs to preserve equipment, I guess maybe that would be the one instance where you would go for Scavenger. Infantry Expert. Infantry Expert used to be a lot better because it used to give defense as well, but it's kind of split them now between Infantry Leader and Infantry Expert. It's essentially if you're using infantry at the end of the day, I'm going to give this an A tier. It uses up a trait slot, which is a downside, but the extra attack on infantry is the way forward. Ambusher is surprisingly good as well. Once again, defense is not something you always want to be doing a lot of in Hearts of Iron 4, but an extra +5 entrenchment is really, really solid, as well as if you stack it with defensive doctrine as well. There's a bunch of other traits you can stack for extra entrenchment too, so you can get some really, really high entrenchment. I'll give that a B tier. Amphibious, so basically it lets you do outer supply grace for a longer period, and it also lets you do naval invasion assault plan. Let's actually see what that does. So basically it lets naval invasion preparation speed plus 50%. You know what? I never knew this even existed. Let's test it out. I'm actually curious. I'm really curious. So if you're planning a naval invasion, let's say from here to here, invasion is still preparing. It will take 140 days preparing. So let's just go for it. It's going to be 140 days. So if I hit this button now, it's still going to be 140 days. I don't get it. Man, what a completely useless trait, because you can only activate this for 7 days. That's saving you like 4 or 5 days off your total invasion plan. Man, what a completely useless trait. I'm not even embarrassed. I'm just disappointed. Yeah, I don't know what to say. Don't select it. I don't know what else to say. That's a straight up F tier. This one's interesting. Naval liaison. If you are a Navy guy, I imagine going for this is actually going to be kind of cool. I actually like it. And because if you are a Navy guy, which is not much incentive to make Navy, this will give you an extra shore bombardment bonus, which shore bombardment is as effective as air superiority. Sadly, it only works against coastlines, which is a bit poop, but it is what it is. The only downside to this, I guess, is you have to use up a trait, I suppose. I'm going to give it a C tier because once again, if it's something you are stacking shore bombardment, it actually is pretty decent. The disappointing traits off Commando. Oh god. Skirmisher. Absolutely dreadful. I think this is probably the worst trait in the entire game you can even assign. It allows you to do probing attack. I bet you didn't even know this even existed. So probing attack allows you to attack without losing your entrenchment. However, the attack has minus 20 attack ability. Ugh, wow. When would you ever want to do this? I'll never know. The idea behind it is you're testing the defenses of the enemy on the front line. And you're doing it by doing an attack that doesn't necessarily compromise your defenses. Oh my god. It's so awful. Oh my god. I want to put it down here. Never select this, guys. Never ever select this. It is one of the worst. In fact, I think it actually is the worst. All right, next up we have paratroopers. Extra paratrooper supply grace. Similar to the amphibious one, is it 240 hours without supply grace, meaning they won't suffer a supply penalty. 10 days worth of supply. Man, that actually is really high. Never thought of it like that. 10 days. We also have glider planes as well. So glider planes allows paratrooper per plane per 100%. That's never a big deal because you're never low on transport planes. Paratrooper organization factor 200%. What is organization factor? I'll never know because we have division recovery rate and we have division organization. But what is division factor? I don't fucking know. Paratrooper anti-air defense plus 50%. One of the issues I find with paratroopers is that when you're using paratroopers, it's usually a suicide mission, so you don't usually care too much about losing them as they hit the ground or get encircled. So this feels kind of redundant. So we've got a paratrooper here, boys, and he's about to go for glider planes. His organization right now is 70. Glider planes means his organization is 70. Question is, guys, what does paratrooper organization factor even mean? I don't know. So it's the amount of org they have when they land. Listen, if you're a paratrooper pro and you love your paratroopers, I suppose this is going to be essential for you. But at the end of the day, the way I use paratroopers on suicide missions, this is not going to be for me. I'm going to give it an E tier just because there's that one instance that you're a paratrooper bro, which I'm not. But if you are, you might take advantage of it and you might enjoy it. Next up is camouflage expert. I think of the 3 traits you can choose here, I think it probably is one of the best. So what it does is it reduces the air superiority bonus on your divisions that the enemy's applying to you by 50%, which is actually pretty big. And it also reduces the amount of damage that CAS could do your army by 50%. 50%, these are big numbers. So in all fairness, guys, if there was a trait that you wanted to go for in the event that you were getting destroyed by air superiority and CAS damage, this is the one you would actually go for because this would actually have pretty big impact. The only downside is it needs Commando. And the truth is getting Commando is very, very difficult. In that niche scenario where you have Commando to begin with and you're getting destroyed by air superiority, you'd go for it. But when would that ever apply? Probably not much, hence the reason why it's a D tier. It's one of those ones where the reward is very good, but the requirements are so unbelievably niche. When would I ever do that? I don't know. Now we're about to enter the field marshal traits. We'll start from the bottom. So charismatic. Do you know what? This is actually pretty good. Division recovery rate is when you're not in combat, when you're actively moving or standing still, how quickly you recover your division organization. This tends to be really good for defensive so you don't go overrun. And it also works really good on the offensive too to maintain the attack and keep the force going. If you want to kind of overrun your opponent, stacking lots of division recovery rate is really, really decent. It's one of those traits that I feel like as a field marshal, you don't know what to pick. So it's there as an option. So I would give this a B tier. Organization first is also pretty decent as well. It allows you to give extra reinforce rate. This is the one instance where if you've not got radio, because it's very early in the game, 1936, 1937, you can go for this and it's a decent replacement for radio. It works on the attack and the defense. Overall, it kind of does a similar thing to what charismatic does. If a division is sat on the back line and not in combat, it's not doing any damage or defending, so therefore it doesn't really take advantage of what it needs to do. So it's one of those things that you can really take advantage of if you stack it really high. There are some doctrines though that make this worthless because they gain more reinforce rate trait anyway, so I'm going to give this a C tier. Offensive doctrine plus 30% entrenchment. Very niche, very defensive, can be pretty good. Overall, though, it wouldn't be the first trait I would go for if you are on the attack. In fact, you'd never go for this if you're on the attack, to be honest with you. I'm going to give this a C tier. Offensive doctrine. So there's a little bit of a cheese with this one, where you can assign this to a field marshal and then make him a general, and they have +1 attack. I suppose that's kind of cool, I suppose. The option is there. Because even though this 30% or gloss when moving doesn't only apply to field marshals, that +1 attack will apply to generals as well. There's a little bit of an exploit there. But do you really want to waste a trait to gain +1 attack? Not really. Once again, I'm going to give this a C tier. It's really good for overruns as well, particularly if you've got really powerful divisions. But the truth is, if you've got really powerful divisions and you're going for overruns, you're already kind of winning anyway. So when will this or gloss even apply? I don't know. Anyway, next up, aggressive assaulter, extra 10% breakthrough. If you are stacking lots of breakthrough, which you will if you're making tank divisions, this one is essential. You need to have brilliant strategies to go for this one, though. It is locked behind a specific character trait of a field marshal, so just be aware of that. Not so much of a benefit, though, if you are going for infantry, because infantry don't have a lot of breakthrough anyway, so it is an A tier. Next one is unwielding defender. It is locked behind inflexible strategies, which is a character trait for generals or field marshals, and it gives extra 10% extra defense. Honestly, 10% defense is not that much for what defense actually is. So in all fairness, this one actually isn't that great. In all fairness, I'm going to give this a C tier with all the other defensive traits. All right, next up, we have got thorough planner. I find myself quite frequently going for this trait. It's one of those ones, if you've got a field marshal that has extra trait slot that's free and it's not assigned to anything, and I'm not waiting for any other traits, some of the big ones like logistics wizards are adaptable, I'm like, I'll go for it. Remember, end of the day, 10% extra planning gives extra % extra attack and extra defense when you're potentially doing planning, and I do a lot of planning in single player, so I firstly feel like it's an A tier. If you disagree, you're wrong. Fast planner, 25% extra planning speed. This one's completely useless. You never really need extra planning because you've got staff office plan, which gives it 400% faster. So you either choose between 400% and use the command power, or 25% permanently. Fast planner is very, very, very bad. I can't even think of one instance when you would ever want to do that. It's gonna go for E tier. I don't know when you'd ever use that, but it's there if you want it. I suppose it's better than the naval invasion ones, put it that way. There are certain traits that give level ups in certain stats more likely. So in this case, Still Staffer will give you more likely to get logistics, but the problem with getting Still Staffer is 200 XP, so it's very high. Just something to be worthwhile to think about. If you are assigning these traits early, then they're more likely to level them up and get them later on. But there are officer core bonuses. You can get extra traits as well. For instance, if you look here, bold attack, 50% chance likely to get +1 attack on level up, 50%. You get the idea. All right, boys, are we ready for the big daddies now? Logistics wizard. This used to give 20% reduction in supply overall. Now it gives 15%. In all fairness, though, this is massive. This stacked with motorized priority level 3 or level 2, depending if it's a field marshal or a general, is game changing. In most cases, unless you're making all massive 45 width divisions and filling them out with your generals, if you are going max motorization priority and you've gone for logistics wizard, you are never going to have trouble with supplies. And the beauty of motorization priority and logistics wizard is it costs you nothing. All right, it costs you a bit of motorized, but you're going to be making motorized anyway for motorization priority, but you're not paying anything extra. Logistics wizard is the real MVP. Logistics wizard is absolutely freaking massive. Do not underestimate the wizard, boyo. If you ever see a general with organizer at the very start of the game, it might be worthwhile to promote them to field marshal just to get logistics wizard. It will sort out so many nightmares when it comes down to supply issues late game. Also, it gives you extra supplies as well. The extra supplies will give you out of supply grace for, is it 5 days? So what it basically means is you get unlimited supply for the full duration of this. This is like a way of oversupplying the divisions on this army, so therefore they never run out of supply. It is pretty good. It is really, 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 really good. The only downside I find with this is that the army that you assign it to tends to have a lot of divisions and battalions in them, so the command power cost is ridiculously high, so that's one issue you might run into. But if you're about to do a big attack with some big chunky divisions, this will give them unlimited supply until it's over. And here we go, the final big daddy, the one that I've saved till last because it is arguably the best trait in the game, is adaptable. Now, it used to get a minus 50% reduction to terrain penalty reduction. The only requirement for this one is you need 2 terrain traits, and that's why before Winter Specialist was such a big one to go for, because if you grind another one like Mountaineer or Hillfighter or Ranger, which are quite common, you'll get adaptable, and you can select it, and adaptable will give you cold acclimatization factor, meh, hot one, meh, but the terrain penalty reduction is just freaking massive. So one of the big hurdles in games, in most cases, is that you attack a terrain such as a big river, a marsh, a mountain, and you'll suffer from a really big terrain penalty when attacking it. But with adaptable, it reduces that penalty by 30%, which is huge. Ouch. There's no doubt about it. Adaptable is based. Yeah, adaptable is definitely, no doubt about it, S tier. You could argue that Panzer Leader and Combined Arms could be higher up, actually. They're really close, like A+, maybe. Infantry Leader, I'm going to take it back to A tier. Once again, the terrain traits are okay, but once again, they just snake line towards adaptable. And this is my tier list. Did you enjoy this tier list? It is your cup of tea. Do you want to see more tier lists? Then don't forget to like and to subscribe. If you like the content, subscribing will let me know that this is what you want more of. I'll see you later, boys. Bye-bye. Everyone who loved this video also loved this one. Give it a click.